I wanted to share with you a wonderful wooden doll. Again, another lovely example, but what's even more extraordinary than the doll itself, which is pretty rare, is this extraordinary costume. And look at it. A little high-waisted, wonderful sleeves, very, very full at the top, but then tied right at the shoulder, and then very full, and then tied again at the wrist. Repeated that way on both sides. Very, very fine. Designed to fit her very slender body, and then having the long full skirt with multiple petticoats underneath and a very, very sweet little bonnet. She's just a wonderful doll. I'm going to move into the wax dolls by telling you a wonderful story that was relayed to me by Mr. and Mrs. Prater. This beautiful wax doll, Montanari type, made in England about 1875, was found by Angela Prater on one of her trips to England, and she acquired it for the museum. In superb original costume, the little muslin with the little dots on it, petit pois they're called in French, and this very, very fine silk bonnet, lacy trimmed bodice, and the coral underdress. Angela brought it back, placed it in the museum, and people looked at it and loved it. And one day a woman came in, looked at the doll, and said, "I have her sister." And the story went on. She relayed the story to Angela that about 1875, what would have been her great-great-great-grandfather, there were 5 granddaughters, and he bought each of them an identical wax doll, only difference being the color of the costume and a little bit of change in the trim. The 5 granddaughters had these dolls. They grew up. Years went by, they had their own children had children, and the dolls, as the family members, gradually dispersed and lost touch with each other. She said, "I have this doll," and she brought it to Angela and said, "I want to reunite it in the museum with her sister." And not only did she reunite the 2 dolls, but Angela connected her with the woman that she had acquired the first doll from. And these 2 at this point, distant cousins became reunited, and it was, I think, what collecting and what search for things in the historical past, that's what it's really all about, is to get in touch with things that happened before and to reunite these connections. So we have these 2 wonderful wax dolls, wonderful in themselves, wonderful with their costumes, and even better, wonderful with their provenance. This is another example of a wax doll that I know many collectors say, okay, I don't collect wax, I don't really like wax, but one of the things that you should be looking for is the fact that because the wax dolls were not the kind of play dolls that children played with very briskly, they tend very often to be found with these superb original costumes, something that Angela Prater looked for her museum. And here she found one in this wonderful coral silk satin silk taffeta gown with the handmade lace running down the front, wonderful silk ribbons, even the same silk ribbons in the hair. We turn it around. Now, one of the things that's different, for example, than you find in the French fashion dolls, and we're going to be looking at a pretty fabulous French fashion doll in just a minute, is that the costumes on these early wax over paper maches tended not to have such fine finished work on them, but they did have great lace, they did have great fabrics, and because they are so well preserved, they're wonderful treasures for you to find. This particular one, the Lucy Peck wax doll from England, is a particular treasure because I want you to see this. She has the lace on her collar with this wonderful little scallop design. When you turn it up and you look at the lace on her dress, the same scallop design. You turn it up and look at the lace on her petticoat, again, the same. And finally, one more. She is wearing her totally matched original little girl costume from the Lucy Peck, what she called Mrs. Peck's doll shop in London. Very, very fine example. Another wax doll. Again, something that you might say, okay, I don't collect wax dolls, and I definitely don't want to collect a double-face wax doll that the head will turn around to reveal the awake girl, asleep and awake. But I ask you to think, number one, the doll would be very rare in itself, and number two, once again, look at her original costume. High style indeed. And again, these are very, very typical colors that were found at the time, this mixture of cream and aqua. Very fine fabric, very fine silk fringe trim, the aqua silk ribbons to match the designs. Look at the skirt on the hemline of the skirt. Very, very fine right there. And a wonderful original bonnet. I think probably the nicest costume, although peek under her skirt and you see she's a clockwork mechanical walking doll, the Auto Peripateticus. But look at the costume this lady appeared in. Very tiny little doll. Remember, the cone skirt, the cone form, had to be designed to accommodate the mechanical clockwork inside. But the clever maker made it in the shape of a skirt, and then the costume was designed to fit over it. And here we have a beautiful long train, wonderful lace, pleated lace, very, very beautiful costume on this lady. I have to show you this. I know it's crazy, they're not dolls, but I wanted you to see the kind of wonderful fabric work that was done. These are doll size, designed as doll accessories, and every one of these little flowers is made of a stiffened silk fabric and with painted design on them, and they're absolutely wonderful little pieces. So when we look for fabric work from that time period, you have to look at all of these and appreciate the unbelievable work that went into them. I'm going to turn it around the back and you can see how there's a central stem going up, and then all the flowers are made individually and then are wired onto that central frame. And what a wonderful little accessory they make. And finally in this group, I want to show you this group of theater dolls, because when you're looking to find dolls in original costumes, you might try looking for theater dolls. This particular group are representing certain characters that were to appear in this particular play. This man has a wonderful face. He clearly is some wise man. And he's wearing his original costume. And then here we have the royalty with their ermine-tipped, faux ermine-tipped, I guess I would say, trim on their coats. And then we have the man with his very, very fine molded hat, and then his original costumes. And I could go on and show you each one of these because every one is just as wonderful and fine as the other. When you're looking for antique original costumes, this is a good category to look into because they tend to be quite well preserved. Now, we just looked a minute ago at the little Auto Peripateticus doll. Let's try to say that word. The little 10-inch one with the blue gown that had the long sweeping train. And now I want to show you how the same system, the same problem was accommodated by Vichy in making their really rare and exquisite luxury automaton, the Gliding Lady. What she has is she's standing on top of a metal box. You think that she's going all the way to the floor, but indeed she's not. There are her feet standing there. They had to find a way, the automaton makers did, to accommodate the doll so she would be able to create the actions that she needed to create, but still be able to wear an exceptional costume. And indeed, Vichy accomplished that. Look at the details. The wonderful, wonderful fan of great luxury detail. The ormolu lorgnette she's holding in her hand. And then her gown, designed to have the long sweeping train that covered the mechanical base and yet gave her such an elegant sweep as she moved across the floor and slowly glided into a semicircle. Just a very, very wonderful, wonderful presentation that Vichy did, an accommodation of fashion to mechanics. Staying in the high fashion period of the French doll period, of the French doll market, is this doll one of the highlights of the French dolls in the Spielzeugmuseum in Davos, Switzerland. Wearing this costume that I can hardly pick this doll up. She's so extraordinary and so perfect, but I'm going to do it and show you because I want to share her costume with you. Look at the back of this. Look at the detail. If you knew that underneath she is wearing all of her wonderful original undergarments, she has beautiful pearl necklace, She has her gloves. She has her parasol. Where are you, dear? Here it is. Which matches her gown, her wonderful parasol. And she has an absolutely exquisite original bonnet. And look at that bonnet. That is so fine. And since we have the bonnet off, we're able to look at her hair. And this is how, when I find French poupée that comes with her hair like this and these little tight ringlet curls with the interwoven ribbon, even though they're matted down with age, to me it's just like a dream to find them this way. And she is a very, very perfect and beautiful example. We also have in this group that I want to show you, staying with fashion, but moving ahead about 40 years, moving ahead about 40 years to the Paris world of about 1914. We find the fashion dolls that were made by Madames Lafitte Desiree. They designed these dolls. They were like on armature bases, hemp-wrapped armature bases, standing on a velvet-covered form and wearing very, very fashionable costumes of the period. Sometimes we're lucky enough to find them with the original plaque on them like this, but not only were the costumes highly stylized and highly perfect of their time, but the dolls were posed. Their armature posing is exactly correct to accommodate the costumes. And I don't know how you would pick which one you would do. Look at the seated one on the bentwood chair. How could you pick which one you wanted? Look at the way her costume is. This is the velvet crepe is wrapped around her so elegantly there, and then the little net fur-edged cape that she's wearing. And look at this wonderful high-style fur muff of the period, and the sort of bunny ear cap, her toque. Very, very beautiful. And each of these has the original Lafitte Desiree signature on the base. Very rare to find in these original costumes. We have, just jumping to another category, when we're lucky to find dollhouse dolls in their original costumes, this is just extraordinary. And here we have wonderful European royalty wearing his formal wear suit with his long cape, his top hat, and his monocle. Very wonderful piece. And finally, in the doll category in this group, if you'll be receiving the book about the museum, you're going to find a double-page spread about these dolls, because what we did was undress them and show you their multi-layer of the costumes. And let me just turn them around now so you can see the costume design on them. We have the little matching boy and girl. These are made of bisque, and they have the multi-layers. They have the original shoes. They have the beading, and they have the most wonderful hats. Their little coifs are so intricately designed. Look at the embroidery on the silk, the dragons, and the other symbols that are so important. And now the girl. Wait till you see this girl. I think she might be a bride, because red was a traditional bride color, wedding gown bride color. And look at her coif. Beads frame her face and form into little pieces at the back. There are little animals that are here. Very, very fine decorative pieces. And finally, her shoes. Her stacked heel, bound foot shoes. Very, very wonderful. Wooden on the bottom, and then the silk embroidery here. Speaking of shoes, some wonderful shoes at the museum. This is a pair that, well, when you look at this pair, you think, well, this is high style today. But I want you to look at the way the soles are made. Those of you who are familiar with the shoes that were made for the Hooray Poupée will recognize instantly this is the very same style of leather soles that were made for the Hooray Poupée. Very, very fine pair of shoes. We have this lovely pair of shoes with their wooden, like slippers with their little wooden heels. And we have another wonderful pair of wooden-heeled leather-bound shoes, very masculine looking, perhaps for a male costume doll. And then another wonderful, wonderful pair of narrow leather shoes designed for early dolls with narrow wooden feet or narrow cloth feet. And there's the bottom on those. And then one other accessory group, I just have to share this with you because this is so wonderful. But look at this fan, like faux tortoiseshell, you can see on the back. And it has the gold design work on it, and then hand-painted panels in between each of the blade, hand-painted floral patterns. But wait, it gets better. Here is one with a hand-painted scene. I know symbolically it must represent something, I'm not sure what, but there are two figures, and they're hand-painted, and there is the sun and the moon, and you can see holding in my hand how tiny this fan is. And finally, this wonderful fan, once again, hand-painted with a design of a little kitten. Very, very precious and very rare early fans.